Was yet again brought under a sharp spotlight at the State Capture Commission as former Bosasa Chief Operating Officer Angelo Agrizzi gave his testimony yesterday. According to Agrizzi, Bosasa, which now operates as African Global Operations, allegedly paid between 4 and 6 million rand a month in bribes to secure tenders. If his testimony is to be believed, this involved high-level networks, and the NPA was even thrown into the mix. While these allegations dropped a bombshell, 2018 could easily be dubbed as the year of private sector exposé in South Africa. With all the revelations made, such as the VBS saga, KPMG, Mckinsey and Trillian, just to mention a few, one asks, how did the country get to this place? Yet not a single person has actually been charged for it. In studio with us, we've got Louw, the Executive Director and co-founder of the Free Market Foundation, to unpack some of this. Louw, good to have you. Welcome to Morning Live.
It's good to be with you, Leanne, and the viewers.
I mean, when we were listening to Bosasa, Angelo Agrizzi yesterday, were you surprised by some of the revelations, or is that kind of, the way things are done?
I wonder, was anyone surprised? Doesn't everyone know this has been going on, this goes on? And frankly, it would be newsworthy to me if somebody said to me, this has not been happening. That would be astounding. I would consider that news.
Yeah.
And the reason I expect it to happen is not because people are corrupt or political parties are corrupt or officials are corrupt. It's because the system rewards corruption. Now, let me make something very clear. You're talking here over a 15-year period of something like R1 billion or 100,000 RDP houses. This is as many people as are unhoused because of this. Now, how is it that the private company's auditors could have allowed R1 billion to float through in bribes and not pick it up? Why does the government have systems, which, by the way, in the private sector are very rare if they exist at all, whereby individual officials can make big discretionary decisions in return for bribes? We have last week, in fact today, there's a court case where a minister has suspended 2 boards, Denel and Nexa, in a smoke-free room. Just do it. There's no procedure, no system, no company law requirements followed. And if you have that sort of power, it would be extremely surprising if there weren't corruption. In other words, corruption should be expected if you have lots of discretionary power as you have in government. Now, how do companies minimize this between each other? So, for example, if a mining company contracts with a civil engineering company to build a shaft, how do they avoid it? Now, firstly, if they don't avoid it, they will be uncompetitive and go out of business. So they have to. So they have systems whereby things have to be approved, they have to be transparent, they have to go to various autonomous committees, they have to be signed off by different people. And when corruption is in fact found as between 2 companies, heads roll very quickly. You made the point, no prosecutions have occurred. All of this corruption in South Africa going on year after year after year, and yet nobody's been jailed.
Okay.
And so that's really hopefully going to change.
Hopefully. Now. I mean, that and that being the big word here, hopefully, because we're hearing a lot, but we're not seeing any repercussions as yet. I just want to dig a little bit deeper into what Angelo Agrizzi was saying yesterday. Now, he spoke of Dudu Myeni. Now, that, I mean, when we talk about receiving NPA documents that were given to himself and Bosasa CEO Gavin Watson, we'll talk about the Watsons in a short while now.
Yes.
I mean, how intricate is this alleged high-level network? And if it's true, I mean, how does Dudu Myeni get NPA documents?
Well, let me say, on the one hand, we can say Dudu Myeni is bad if that happened. At the moment, it's an allegation. As a lawyer, I have to insist that people are innocent until proven guilty in the proper court with proper proceedings. So at the moment, it's a set of allegations. But I would make this observation. The power she had to make discretionary decisions, to hire and fire people, the power the minister has to hire and fire people and award contracts, it's a temptation that nobody should be subjected to. You cannot give somebody the ability to award contracts, to hire and fire people, hire and fire companies, and expect them not to be corrupt. That is an unreasonable expectation of people other than saints. Normal human beings should never be in the position she was. And if she's put in that position, the question is who's to blame if there is indeed corruption? Is it her or is it the system? Is it the politicians who create the ability to be corrupt? And I would say it's the latter. I think that what we should say is we have within government far too much discretionary power, power exercised whimsically behind smoke-free rooms. I repeat that as today there's another court case, the Nexa case, which should be followed, because here you have, he might be absolutely right, but a minister simply fires an entire board and says they were insubordinate. Well, a board's not meant to be subordinate. A board's meant to operate autonomously of an autonomous state agency. And that every single board member, not one of them is presumed innocent, can just be fired by decree. Now, this is not how things should work. There should be proper processes, hearings, weighing up. People's reputations are shattered and destroyed. They're never employable again, just at the whim of somebody in power, at the whim of a CEO of a state-owned enterprise, the whim of a minister, and there should be checks and balances so that that sort of thing can't be done. And I repeat, this is very important. If you have the sort of power Dudu Myeni had, if you have the ability she had without checks and balances to grant contracts, benefits, awards, then it would be a very strange world if it weren't corrupt. You should expect corruption if you set up those levels of temptation.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what is happening right in front of our eyes. Now, when we look back to, I think it was in 2009, 2010, the SIU made investigations into Bosasa. I mean, what we heard yesterday, this has been going on forever, for a very, very long time. And yet, the findings that were handed over to the NPA, absolutely nothing has been done. I mean, I saw a headline yesterday in one of the publications basically saying the Watsons make the Guptas look like amateurs in terms of state capture, and nothing is done after an investigation is handed over to the NPA. Talk to me about this.
Yes, and the allegations, I repeat their allegations, and I insist that we must presume innocence till guilt is proven properly. And a commission like this, by the way, I have my personal doubts about doing things in the executive branch of government which ought to be done in the judiciary or the prosecuting authority. I think the separation of powers is also not adequately appreciated and maintained. That's a different matter. We have Parliament conducting hearings, into Steinhoff or whatever. Well, Parliament shouldn't be doing that. Parliament's job is to make policy. So anyway, that aside, yes, the Watson brothers have been around for a long time, and there was a time when they were heroes. They were great rugby players, and
indeed.
they were fighting against
We're talking
apartheid,
Gavin and Cheeky Watson.
playing mixed, and playing mixed rugby when it was technically illegal. And to that, hats off to them. But unfortunately, from that time on, and we're talking, 30 years or 40 years or 25 years, a long, long time, they've been tied up very intimately with the political structures which they got involved with then and supported then, and then seem to have become involved in the system of bribery. And what we have to say is, I repeat, if they can get away with it, if the audit systems, the checks and balances, the controls over officials are absent, then is it fair to them to blame them? If you give people that sort of temptation, then you're expecting them to be saintly. Now, I don't think human beings are saintly. That is why you have checks and balances. That's what's lacking. The system is to blame, not the individuals.
I mean, if we have serious institutions like the NPA that are implicated in these messy corruption allegations, that I think is what the scariest part of all of this. I mean, do we actually still have a fully functioning country that is actually being looked over by something like an NPA if they are so corrupt?
You know, Leanne, it's easy for all of us to wallow in the misery, but I just want to make this observation. We should at least celebrate an important fact, that you and I are having this discussion, that we're living in a country in which this is not covered up. We're living in a country in which this can be freely spoken about and is investigated and reported. Now, I'm proud to be in such a country. Most countries in the world, this would be covered up and would not be the subject of this TV program or all the newspaper coverage to which you've referred. So let's firstly be proud of that. We've achieved that, a level of transparency, open debate and discourse, but what we haven't achieved is the checks and balances within the system to prevent this level of corruption. And that's unfortunate, but at least it's not necessarily more than in other countries. On the contrary, it is that it is exposed that I think is worth celebrating. So let's not forget our feather in our cap for that. That, of course, in no way condones the rot that is setting and the lack of actual convictions and prosecutions. Let me just give you many others. The Steinhoff case, the KPMG case, the Hogan-Lovells case, whatever. I keep saying, where are the prosecutions? If people did something wrong, prosecute them. And otherwise keep quiet. You know, in other words, I say, presume people innocent unless you actually lay a charge. And get on with it.
Yeah.
Present the evidence and let it be properly argued in a proper court on a balance of probabilities or beyond reasonable doubt if it's criminal. And that, unfortunately, we are not seeing, and that is a failure of the systems, the institutions. So I'm inclined to say I don't condone the individuals, but I say it's not fair to subject people to this level of temptation and then expect them not to become corrupt, expect them not to prosecute people who should be prosecuted. The system shouldn't let that be possible.
It shouldn't be allowed to be done that way, and that's the reality. I just want to end this up. We've got we're going to be talking to DA leader Mmusi Maimane in a minute or two. So I just want to quickly wrap this up. You mentioned something about the state capture inquiry and where we're at, and you're not too sure if you are a fan of these and that these should actually be in a court of law. And that, I think, is what a lot of South Africans are saying. It's like, okay, so we tune in, we listen, we read, we're hearing stories, and yet at the end of the day, nobody is held accountable,
No.
Nobody is sitting behind bars, nobody has so much as been wrapped on the knuckles for any of this. Now, I mean, what's really going to come out of this? Because this is basically storytelling right now. Nothing has been proven. They're all just people's views, and you know, the law is not at play here. So where are we going with this at the end of the day?
Yes, I'm very worried about South Africa having lost the plot on the separation of powers. What are the proper functions of the branches of government? Parliament should not be running kangaroo courts. Parliament should not be doing inquiries into whether the law has been broken somewhere. Parliament should be formulating policies that result in economic growth and jobs. The executive should not be running courts. Now, eminent Judge Zondo, obviously, but should the executive branch of government be deciding on this hearing, and does it mean anything? Can there be convictions?
And its recommendations at the end of the day.
And recommendations, yes. So I would say that we in South Africa need to go right back to Section 1 of the Constitution, which the very first provision says we are founded on the supremacy of the rule of law, and the rule of law has various elements, one of which is the separation of powers, and we should get the judiciary out of messing with policy. We should get the executive not running all these tribunals and ombuds offices and hearings. The executive should be executing and implementing policy, not running kangaroo courts. And the trouble in South Africa is we haven't got an appreciation of keeping the functions of government in the right place. Prosecuting authorities, as Bob Glenister brought out with the Scorpions issue, should be autonomous, independent agencies.
Okay.
And they should prosecute. They should be investigative authorities. They should be judicial authorities, executive, and they should not be doing each other's jobs.
Indeed.
And at the moment, no one in South Africa ever talks about it. For example, I doubt if ever on your TV program anyone has ever said, why is Parliament running kangaroo courts? Or quasi-courts. Why is Parliament doing investigations into whether laws have been broken? It's not its job. Its job is policy making. Why is the executive running things like commissions and courts, whether they're on competition policy or consumer affairs or whatever? It's not its job.
Indeed.
Get it back to the judiciary.
All right, let's leave it there. Leon Lane, thank you. Not Leon Lane. Stick to its lane. That's pretty much so it. Leon Louw, Executive Director of the Free Market Foundation, talking about the role of the private sector in corruption as revealed by Angelo Agrizzi, former Bosasa CEO in the State Capture Commission yesterday. As mentioned, Mmusi Maimane is our guest. Just